You ever know someone who's just incredibly sweet and gentle, but they seem to get sick after even the smallest argument? It's a really interesting puzzle, and one that's been explored in homeopathic theory for, well, over 2 centuries now. Today, we're going to dive deep into a fascinating personality profile from that literature called Staphysagria. It paints this compelling picture of what happens when emotions are suppressed and the surprising ways the body reacts.
And this, right here, this is the big question, isn't it? The answer, as it turns out, isn't about weakness at all. It's about a very specific and pretty intense internal conflict. So let's get into it. Why someone who goes out of their way to avoid a fight can end up paying such a high physical price for staying silent.
Okay, so first things first, what does this personality actually look like on the outside? Well, the source material describes the Staphysagria type as someone who is just super sweet, mild, and soft-spoken. They present this really calm and gentle face to the world. These are the peacekeepers, right? The kind of person who will just give in rather than get into it with somebody. They're not assertive at all, and you might even think they're a little timid or meek. But that agreeable exterior is hiding a much, much more turbulent inner world. Because underneath all that calmness is something the sources called morbid sensitivity. And let's be clear, this isn't just about having your feelings hurt easily. This is described as the very foundation the whole problem grows on. A sensitivity so deep that a harsh word can feel like a physical punch and can literally make them sick. And this incredible sensitivity leads us straight into the core conflict, which you could almost call it the dignity trap. This is where the paradox really starts to take shape. So here you have the two warring sides laid out plain as day. On one hand, they are so sensitive that they feel every little insult, every injustice so deeply. But on the other hand, they have this incredibly powerful, almost rigid sense of personal dignity. They truly believe it's beneath them to stoop to the level of the person who wronged them. And this quote from the old texts just captures the result of that clash perfectly. They get insulted, their sense of honor stops them from fighting back, and so that intense emotion has nowhere to go. It turns inward and shows up as real physical illness. So you can see how this dynamic kicks off a predictable chain reaction every time. It starts with some kind of insult, which naturally makes them indignant and angry. But then their sense of dignity kicks in and says, nope, we're not fighting back. So that anger just gets swallowed, it turns inward, and that's when the body starts to react. You can imagine, over years and years, this cycle just builds and builds an incredible amount of internal pressure. So what's the long-term price for swallowing all that emotion? Well, according to this theory, the body's the one that ultimately has to foot the bill for all that silence. And this is really a core idea here. Emotions have energy. If you don't express that energy outwardly, it doesn't just, poof, disappear. It has to go somewhere. It moves inward, and it can start messing with the body's normal functions, leading to all sorts of physical symptoms. And the list of potential physical issues is, well, it's surprisingly diverse. The theory links this internal state to everything from getting styes over and over again and teeth that just seem to crumble, to bladder infections that show up after some kind of trauma. It even describes these very specific headaches, like having a block of wood in your head, and, get this, sweating that's triggered specifically by suppressed anger. Now, this is a fascinating little detail. This whole theme of being sensitive to insults isn't just emotional. It can be physical, too. The body might overreact to the insult of a surgeon's sharp knife, for example, causing pain that sticks around way longer than it should. Okay, so for years, maybe even decades, this person swallows their anger, keeps up that calm, dignified front. But you can't do that forever. Eventually, the pressure just becomes too much, and the dam breaks. The sources use a fantastic metaphor for this. It's like constantly shaking a bottle of soda. Every single insult, every feeling they swallow is just one more shake. So they take it all in, the disrespect from their boss, the unfairness from a family member, that thoughtless comment from a total stranger. And on the outside, they keep their cool. They really believe they're taking the high road. But with every single suppressed feeling, the pressure inside just builds and builds and builds. Until one day, something happens, the cap flies off, and the release is just explosive. And honestly,
It's a total shock to everyone who thought they knew that. This eruption is the complete opposite of their usual personality. This sweet, gentle person might literally tremble with rage. They might start throwing things, or they can get so angry their voice just disappears. It's years of pent-up emotional energy being released all at once. And to put this into perspective, the literature contrasts this with another type called nux vomica. The nux vomica type, they retaliate immediately. They'll hit you back first and maybe think about it later. Staphysagria is the polar opposite. Suppress, 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 until one final massive explosion. So we've seen the core conflict, this battle between sensitivity and dignity, but there are a few other layers that really help create the full picture of what's going on. The sources suggest this pattern often gets its start from a history of being dominated or abused, which creates that foundation of suppression. This often leads to a habit of turning anger inward, actually blaming themselves for how they've been treated. And, crucially, the literature also describes this intense conflict around sexuality, where a high sex drive can clash with a deep-seated shyness, guilt, or shame. This quote really just sums it all up, doesn't it? To really understand this state, you have to look past the physical symptoms and get to the emotional story. Like it says, the impression made upon the mind is the real key to the whole thing. So in the end, what we're really seeing is a whole narrative arc. It's a journey that begins with that extreme sensitivity, is defined by the silent, dignified suppression of hurt, leads to a body that's practically screaming for help through physical symptoms, and finally culminates in that shocking emotional explosion. The portrait of Staphysagria, whether you see it as a metaphor or a homeopathic reality, it kind of pushes us all toward a pretty universal question. It challenges us to take a look at our own relationship with dignity and anger, and it leaves us with this final thought. What really is the cost of the emotions we don't express?